However, when his hand reached for Fang Shen's hilt, Huacheng immediately held him back. "No need," he said darkly. A flash of golden light suddenly erupted from the center of Lan Sheng's belly, its rays blinding the ghostly crowd. They yelped loudly, fleeing to make room. "What the shit?" Shilian focused his eyes. When that golden light died down, the fetus spirit that had been so desperate to burst out seemed to be somehow fettered, and Lan Sheng's belly had flattened to its normal state. The thing holding it back was a belt on her waist. At first glance, that belt looked quite ordinary, but when Shilian took a good look, he was astonished. "Why would you have something like this on you?" Even with its color faded from washing, Shilian could tell that the belt was an item of heavenly essence. Many ingenious spiritual weapons of the heavens only reveal their phenomenal abilities when protecting their masters in dire circumstances. Even though the embroidered patterns on the belt were heavily worn and damaged, Shilian was certain that it was an item only heavenly officials could possess. A golden belt. And by the look of its design, the belt had once belonged to a heavenly official of the upper court. Golden belts were considered a sophisticated gift in the heavenly realm, and the act of gifting one carried a special meaning. If a male official were to gift his belt to another, it was a gesture to signify affection, and the nature of that affection was evident. One could well imagine that something like a golden belt would not be so easily given away, and not so easily lost. Shilian gaped. "Miss, could your child be—" He trailed off as he suddenly remembered where he was. Regardless of whether this was the lair of all evil, to inquire after the details of a woman's personal affairs in public was far from courteous. He immediately cut himself off. "No!" Lan Sheng instantly cried in response. "I haven't even said anything. Why are you saying no to?" Shilian wondered. He asked instead, "Did you depend on this golden belt to sustain yourself throughout the past 700 or 800 years?" The crowd of female ghosts were stunned to hear this. "Holy shit! Lan Sheng, you're that old? Didn't you always say you're only 300 something? No, she even said she was 200 once. You're falsifying your records." The fetus spirit had about 700 or 800 years of cultivation, so its mother would of course be around the same age. However, Lan Sheng didn't possess a grudge of equal weight. The golden belt's immense spiritual powers had doubtless been instrumental in enabling her to stay in the corporeal world as an ordinary ghost for so long. If the father of that fetus spirit was a heavenly official, then the degree of its savagery made sense. A heavenly official having an affair with a mortal woman, whether he'd ended up abandoning or neglecting her, she had met a violent end with her baby forcibly torn from her womb. Now, both mother and son were of the ghost realm, and the fetus had likely murdered countless others. No matter what, this case was no less serious than the case of Xuanji. It even seemed rather similar on the surface, which made it easy to determine how best to handle it. Shilian looked to Huacheng. "Sunlong, this miss—" No need to say more. Huacheng said, "Do what you must. You needn't ask me." Shilian answered softly. Upon receiving permission, he turned to Lan Sheng. All the ghosts were demanding more gossip. Lan Sheng, who's your baby's dad? What an outrage! Did he only care enough to kill it, but not bury it? Cared to knock you up, but not raise the kid? Just who is it? You gotta avenge yourself!" Lan Sheng clenched her teeth and stared hard at Shilian. Who else could it be? She didn't utter the name, but Shilian understood. "Why don't you come back to the heavenly court with me?" "No!" Lan Sheng immediately shouted. Of course, it was useless for her to object. Willing or not, Shilian had to take her away, and he hardened his expression. "This fetus spirit is exceedingly violent. Who knows how much blood is on its hands? The case has become too convoluted for you to continue to shield it. This matter must be confronted and reported to the heavenly court," Shilian stated solemnly. "If that heavenly official is an honest one, or if there was some kind of misunderstanding between you two, then we can have you and your child recognized and deal with the matter of its crimes after. If that heavenly official has wronged you or worse, then there's even more reason to demand justice. No matter what, the fetus spirit is your son, but also his son. How can anyone else interfere if the father is ignorant of this affair?" The ghosts thought his speech made sense. Also, if they let Lan Sheng haul her son up to cause a riot in the heavens, how exciting would that be? The bigger the chaos, the better. So they urged her, "Yeah, Lan Sheng, what are you afraid of? Go settle your score with that guy. If he won't recognize you, we'll burn down his temples." Shilian said to Huacheng, "I will make a trip to the upper court this instant and report this case." While Lan Sheng protested, she knew she couldn't stop him. After snapping out of her shock, she suddenly knelt down and prostrated before Huacheng. Chenzu, thank you for your kindness and grace in sheltering me. Shi Lian was taken aback. It was out of desperation that Lan Sheng set fire to Paradise Manor and broke the rules of Ghost City, she continued. I am ever so sorry. Pray Chenju will not hold it against me. She had always been a sauntering shrew, but when she spoke now, it was like she was a different person. Many of those familiar with her watched in shock, but Huacheng appeared unstirred, and he turned to Shi Lian. Gaga stopped by in too much of a hurry. I'll wait for you to come down again and host you properly next time. Shi Lian nodded, then took Lan Sheng and rushed straight to the heavens. As he walked down the main street of the heavenly capital, he announced in the spiritual communication array, Everyone, please make your way to the Palace of Divine Might. There is a matter that requires conference. He exited the array as soon as he was done and didn't waste any time bringing Lan Sheng to the Palace of Divine Might. Lan Sheng was but an ordinary ghost, and couldn't enter the palace, so Shi Lian waited outside with her until Jun Wu himself arrived and granted permission for Lan Sheng to enter. It didn't take long for the heavenly officials who were currently present in the heavens to make their way to the hall, where they were met with the bewildering sight of a crude female ghost slathered in heavy makeup. She stood in stark contrast to the transcendence of the heavenly court. A black-clad heavenly official strolled in, and he paused for a moment when he saw what was in the center of the hall. This was Mu Qing. Lan Sheng also glanced at him and immediately lowered her head, her lips quivering. Mu Qing showed no further reaction and only asked impassively, Your Highness, who is that woman? At this address, Lan Sheng's face changed. She looked at Shi Lian as if she were recalling something that she wasn't entirely sure of. Just then, both the Wind and Water Masters arrived. The pair of brothers looked quite similar to each other with their matching fans and white robes gently fluttering. They painted a beautiful picture. Shi Qingxuan fanned himself as he spoke. Yeah, Temple Master, why did you bring a lady ghost here today? Shi Lian was puzzled. A Temple Master? What Temple Master? Of Puchi Shrine? Why the sudden address? Then he realized Shi Qingxuan probably meant Master of Thousand Lights Temple. He didn't know how to acknowledge that title, and could only pretend he hadn't heard it. But Shi Qingxuan was cheerful as he greeted everyone around him, then turned to the ghost. Huh? This ghost Zhizha has something in her belly? Why do I have the feeling that it's... He wondered aloud as he approached, looking like he wanted to touch her. Shi Wudu snapped his fan shut. Qingxuan! Shi Qingxuan's hand instantly shrank back, and he tried to justify himself. I just thought there was an aura of evil and wanted to see if there was something dangerous. Shi Wudu continued to scold him. You're a man and a heavenly official. This is the Palace of Divine Might. How could you do something so unmannerly? No, don't turn into a woman either. Even in a woman's form is equally disgraceful. Change back right this instant. Ling Wen shook his head. He folded a stack of documents and reports under his arm and approached the palace and approached to place his hand on Lan Sheng's belly. After a moment, he dropped his hand and hummed. What a vicious fetus spirit. How many hundreds of years old? 700 or 800, Shi Lian answered. He gave an account of the 2 times he had met the fetus spirit, and how the fetus spirit's attack on a pregnant woman led him to find the female ghost Lan Sheng. He didn't bring up the details of Huacheng and Ghost City, and Lan Sheng herself naturally remained quiet on the subject. At the end, Shi Lian concluded, and that's how it came to be. I don't know if that heavenly official is still in this world, or still working with us, nor whether there is some misunderstanding in all this, nor whether he knew. That's why I brought this miss here. Fengshen knitted his brows. If there wasn't a misunderstanding, and he knew about the mother and child, then it's simply irresponsible of him to leave them like that without a word. Pei Ming crossed his arms and commented leisurely. I completely agree with General Nanyang. This is far too irresponsible. To know which heavenly college this disregarded baggage belongs to, but if he's on duty, he best come forward. As he finished, he felt countless eyes on him. Silence had descended upon the Palace of Divine Might. A moment later, Pei Ming wondered aloud, Are you all having some sort of misunderstanding about me? Shi Qingxuan stopped fanning his fan. I don't think it's a misunderstanding. More like we know you too well. Pei Ming immediately defended himself. It wasn't me. Everyone laughed dryly, and even Shi Wudu and Ling Wen looked unconvinced by his denial. Pei Ming grew frustrated, and he supported his temple with his hand as he explained earnestly, Well, I've had some flings with the women of the ghost realm before, but I really don't recognize this one. If those words of his were to be taken seriously, they were believable. How could the man himself not know with whom he shared a past? Many criticized Pei Ming's promiscuity, but he had never denied any affairs and never denounced anything he'd done. It wasn't like he couldn't afford it. Unless they behaved like Xuanji, women who had affairs with him were lavished with wealth and sweetness. They were all guaranteed a lifetime of riches and care until they no longer wanted to associate with him. If Lan Sheng truly had a fleeting affair with Pei Ming while she was alive, she shouldn't have suffered having her womb ripped open and her son stolen from her, or his becoming a vicious ghost. Besides, Pei Ming had high standards when it came to women. He only dallied with those of extraordinary appearance, and he also preferred beauties with a natural look. As everyone in the hall could see, Lan Sheng wore such a heavy layer of makeup that her real features were indiscernible, and her general looks, class, and behavior were a far cry from the lovers Pei Ming usually chose. So when he claimed he wasn't to blame, everyone silently somewhat believed him. Except it was only silently and somewhat. When an occasion to see General Pei get checkmated presented itself, how could they not indulge in the fun? And so they stood by and watched him argue with smiles on their faces. Whether any member of the crowd was convinced depended entirely on their current mood. At first, Xilian also thought the father was more likely to be Pei Ming. He had a track record, after all. But as he studied Pei Ming's expression, Xilian grew less certain. Pei Ming didn't seem to be lying. He recalled Hua Cheng saying there was nothing to fear, as Pei Ming wasn't a shady fellow, or something along those lines. After some contemplation, Xilian continued, Miss Lan Sheng originally responded ambiguously, asking who else could it be, so I also assumed. But since General Pei denies such claims, maybe there's been some misunderstanding. Besides, it can't be the same person every time, so why don't we ask around? Unexpectedly, Lan Sheng spoke up. It's not him. Xilian was taken aback and turned to her. It's not him, Lan Sheng repeated. Ling Wen said coolly, What, so it's not? Shi Wudu also politely said, So it actually isn't. Pei Ming turned to Shi Wudu and Ling Wen. I already said it wasn't. The two of you are adding insult to injury. Just you wait. The heavenly officials were briefly disappointed, but then they grew even more excited. After all, Pei Ming was always the one generating women's wanton scandals. If it were him, this would be nothing new. But if he wasn't to blame, that meant there was likely another male official, present or not, who had instigated a new wave of excitement. How could they not be thrilled? Earlier in Ghost City, Lan Sheng hinted that the man in question was Pei Ming, but now she denied it. Xilian felt something was amiss, but he made no effort to express his suspicion. Then who is it? He inquired. Lan Sheng stared squarely at him, her eyes unmoving. You. Xilian thought she wasn't finished. What about me? I said, the man is you, Lan Sheng declared. And that is chapter 46.